some of these patients that come to see us, it is so amazing the amount of confidence that they have and determination, and they do well. I have seen many people save their lives. My philosophy is, if you come and see me, you're hiring me to do a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I like doing my job really well.
Welcome to the Healing Reset, a place where we aim to provide hope and true healing from chronic suffering by talking to experts on how to treat your whole body system, not just your symptoms. Contrary to modern day belief, your body is designed to heal. I'm Jess, your host. Today we have on Dr. Dan Rubin, an oncology naturopath practicing out of Scottsdale, Arizona. He's an expert at the integration of traditional and naturopathic medicine for people with cancer and serves both adult and pediatric populations. Today, we're going to talk around philosophy, testing, and as always, hope for those of you out there living with cancer or know a person who has the diagnosis. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rubin. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks. That's good. Let's have some fun.
Yeah. Can you just start off by kind of talking about your journey briefly into naturopathic medicine? And then also for the listeners out there that are thinking, hey, what is naturopathic medicine? What differentiates that from a conventional system?
Yeah, I mean, my journey was interesting. I can take it back all the way to 1992, which is, I found myself back in my college hometown of Iowa City. I was so interested back in the early 90s in triathlon. So I went back there from Chicago. So I was living at home, moved back to Iowa City to train, and I was working at a health food store. It was like an OG health food store. And there I met my first mentor. One was the owner, Mickey, who taught me a lot. I mean, he had the health food store. To have that, you have to be a mentor. I'm working in it. I'm interested in health. I have a degree in philosophy that I got from University of Iowa, which anybody who's interested in going into naturopathic medicine or integrative medicine philosophy, especially existential philosophy, ends up being an amazing, amazing background, because you're trained to argue and you're trained to think and consider and to create.
Well, when I think of philosophy, I think of a depth around your thought.
Yeah. I argue every day for how we should look at a person, what we should look at, how we should treat. And I end up using my background. Anyhow, point was, I was working at this health food store, and adjacent to the health food store and prescribing homeopathics out of this health food store is my biggest mentor at the time, Philip Lansky, Dr. Philip Lansky, an MD and a PhD. In the early 90s, practicing homeopathic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, Qigong, a true healer. And he showed me, he understood that I had this appreciation for health because I was working on myself. And he showed me a thumbnail ad in the East-West Journal for Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. I had to go get my prerequisites. I moved back home. I go to community college. I get my science prerequisites, and I get accepted to Southwest College, and I start in 1994.
Okay.
And I started getting very interested in biochemistry and the intricate workings of the physiological systems of the body, pathology. And I don't know exactly where my great interest in oncology was, but I think philosophically, because it's so answerless even today, thinking back almost 30 years ago or so, maybe 25, 26, 27 years ago, when we were thinking about cancer, it's so much more advanced today. I just tended towards it, and I tended towards complex physiology, and the unknown is certainly complex.
I heard you once say that your love for naturopathic oncology stems from an inherent desire to understand the physiology and biochemistry in the human body, which is basically a summation of what you just said. And it flows along for the listeners out there. The first thing when I reached out to Dr. Rubin said, what are you an expert in? What are you wanting to talk about today? Which you will hear as this conversation unfolds. He said the philosophy of cancer, and then went on to talk about the hope behind cancer. And so I just love that your start authentically began with wanting to understand the human body better and how it works.
Interested in N of one. Each person is unique. And they say, oh, can we find, the root cause and the cure, which is difficult to find. But I mean, it is a precept of naturopathic medicine is to treat the cause, treat the whole person. But if somebody doesn't develop a philosophy for the individual, not a belief, a philosophy of the approach, which comes from testing, a good doctor-patient relationship, intricate assessments. And sometimes this takes a long time. And sometimes you have to wait till treatment is sort of, cleared itself and people are better. And, you start to understand this person. Then you can really have that depth of understanding and that depth of relationship.
You go to school, you develop a passion for oncology. And I want the listeners to understand, we clearly understand oncology from a baseline level, but when you put the word naturopathic oncology, when you put those two together, what are you bringing to the table that's different from a conventional standpoint?
A philosophy, the philosophy of natural therapeutics, the precepts of naturopathic medicine. It's from the very first step into the room or the very first word with that patient. I mean, heck, when they call your office, they are searching for something that's not just conventional. And they know that. And here in 2021, what are we, the end of 2021, the term naturopathic oncologist is now popularized. It's understood. It's accepted. I'm a board certified naturopathic oncologist, and I have been since 2006 is when I believe we got our first certification.
Now, from what I understand, you took lead on bringing this specific specialty into the naturopathic world. And so what did that look like at the time? When you think of treating the whole body, I often think of integrative or functional medicine, alternative medicine, as a doctor who just treats the whole body, regardless of the quote unquote diagnosis. And I don't think of specialization. So as you're heading this to make it a normed thing, what did that look like?
Well, thank you for asking. This was in 2004. I was one of a group of people who wanted to launch a specialty for the main reason was to protect the public. I mean, heck, we took an oath when we got our diplomas from naturopathic medical school to protect the public. And the notion,
is that similar? Would you say that's similar to do no harm? First, do no harm.
Well, I will argue the precept I think it's ultimately do no harm. I think in some respects, we absolutely, when treating the patient, do harm. There's harm in surgery. There's harm in giving, chemotherapeutics. There's harm in giving an herb that creates a certain response. And so ultimately, I would say, I hadn't thought of that. And thank you for that conceptualization. But the idea was oncology in the early 2000s, the early part of this century, started moving at a different rate and a rapid rate. We had the advent of small molecules, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, and just it took a different turn from the traditional chemotherapeutic and radiation surgery. And there was more biologic agents being used. And you could tell that the pace was just accelerating. There is no way that a good general practitioner or a non-specialist could keep tabs back then. I'm sorry, looking into the future of what naturopathic oncology would become, we saw that and had the foresight to say, like, this needs a specialization. I mean, heck, at the time, that's all I was doing was seeing people with cancer. And so my skill level was so far and above that of somebody down the street that may see 5 people with cancer a year. We thought that it was incumbent upon us as responsible physicians to bring the specialty and say, like, we are. Plus, in the state of Arizona, it was actually unlawful to call yourself or refer to yourself or put yourself out as a specialist to the public without recognition by the board, state board. In order to do that, you had to have some certain criteria. So we launched the Oncology Association of Naturopathic Physicians and the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology. This is in 2004. I was the founding president for the first 5 years, and myself and our board developed the criteria, and we invented the naturopathic oncologist, which then those who became board certified had a designation after their ND or NMD as FABNO, Fellow to the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology. That was recognized by the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians, and then it could be recognized by state boards such as Arizona Naturopathic Medical Board. And there was the birth of the naturopathic oncologist, which has done nothing but grow and become more and more accepted, even in big cancer institutions.
To the listeners out there, you might be saying, why is this conversation important? And when I was thinking through this from my own personal level, I think we really fight specialty because we want a doctor to look at you as a patient, to look at you as a person from your whole body perspective. We don't want you to go see an endocrinologist, your primary care doctor, or your oncology doctor. We don't want you to have 18 different doctors all prescribing something for your symptoms. And so when I thought through the naturopathic oncology specialty or specialties in general, it really clicked in that you're still getting a whole body perspective. But as humans, we all run with specific strengths, and then we try to minimize our weaknesses. We do this every single day. And it's such a cool thing to have the combination of somebody who's willing to say, no, I look at cancer every single day. I'm going to specialize. I'm going to confidently approach you as a person with cancer, and we're going to try to find root cause. I really appreciate you leading that movement. It's pretty cool. So now let's take a dive into your philosophy of cancer. How should listeners think about a cancer diagnosis? And what does that look like when they sit in front of you?
We don't know how necessarily somebody gets cancer, but we can start to come to some conclusions based on discussion and testing. But my patients come and see me after their diagnosis. So at that point, all you really can conduct is a retrospective analysis, like look back, discuss with people. And a lot of times I'll say, why do you think you got this? And quite often stress, or there was an event in somebody's lives, or a series of events, or whether they're unfortunate or traumatic or incredibly stressful, or it was a combo of a toxic exposure with a poor diet, high stress, low sleep. There's a lot. The point is that cancer arises within one's body. You don't catch it per se. I mean, yes, you could catch a virus and you might get certain lymphomas, et cetera, and there's certain bugs or infections that could be associated or actually could be causative, but that's more rare. And so starting with the philosophy that the cancer arises within oneself, you then say, well, how and why? Where is the genetic issue or the genomic issue, let's say? Because one of the hallmarks of cancer is that you have an issue with a cell that doesn't divide correctly. And if that cell, if part of sort of the programming in that cell is ill, and that cell doesn't go through a death process, like to self-destruct, or the immune system, for whatever reason, can't recognize it, can't find it, then the cell survives. And that's another hallmark of cancer, is not dying, surviving. And it's generally associated with proliferative capacity. It can have the ability to make copies of itself. And so it does, insidiously and secretly. And that's how one develops a tumor, because that cell creates its own self-population. Why did that start? That's the big question that we're not close to. Genetically, I think we can say you have this gene. You're going to get cancer. Your chance of getting these types of cancer is X or Y. And so be prepared for that. And you might even want to have some prophylactic surgery. I think most famously is either for a female hysterectomy or a bilateral mastectomy, because they might have a hereditary gene where their chances of getting breast cancer are high. Anyhow, that's off the subject. Point is where does it come from? And I think if a person wants to be in that space with you and they're curious about it, why it happened, then you go there with them and you have to start from there. But not all people need to answer that question or say, like, I don't know, you ask them the question, why did you get cancer? Or it sort of depends on where they are when they come to see you. Because certainly if somebody comes to see us and they've had surgery and they're in, or if they're in active cancer treatment, like they're getting a chemotherapeutic, or the scenarios where people come to see us, there's many of them.
Yeah, I imagine just looking at the multitude of different varieties of cancer, the severities of cancer, and if you're seeing this all day, I imagine that there's many of them. So is there specific testing that you do when someone comes to you? You have an intuitive conversation with them. Why do you think that you have cancer?
If they want to go down
want to go down there, which I think is a valid question. We forget to even check in with our body on a daily basis, let alone once we have a chronic illness. So then step 2, is there initial screenings that you run, or do they usually come to you with a lot of
Yeah, no, it's a
information
good
already?
You said we forget to check in with our body on a regular basis. And it's really a good point because it's fairly often that I'll hear somebody say, and this is even quoted in a book, the Writers Unite to Fight Cancer book from, I think, 2014, that where we'll say, cancer saved my life. Why? Because it was the wake up call that I needed for me to really take control of my health. So it's true. We are busy and life is fast. And sometimes people don't have the time, or they have the time, they don't create the time to go get checked. They prioritize their time differently. So thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it in the context of this. You kind of get lost in it when you're in the trenches day to day with children, pediatric oncology, adults, and they come to us in all stages, meaning, early stage or, advanced stage. And advanced stage could mean that they have no symptoms at all and they just got, one lesion on their bone, which is metastatic, which was radiated. They don't have any evidence of disease, but still they're with stage 4 disease and they're not sick. And they want to say, I don't want this to come back. And that's a great patient who understands what could be in front of them and wants to prioritize their health. And with that patient, we would then really be able to engage testing vigorously because they're not sick, they're not in treatment. There's nothing that's going to create an artifact for testing. And we would go and we would just do a general survey of their bodily fluids, of their bodily systems. There's a lot. We can analyze urine, blood, stool, saliva. We talk to patients. You're analyzing not analyzing the psyche, but you're getting to know people. Versus somebody who comes to you on the sort of the other end of the spectrum, who has been in conventional medicine, is incredibly sickly because of it, can't gain any weight, they can't even really walk a quarter mile. Mm-hmm. This is not uncommon. They're having to take a break from their chemotherapeutic because their bone marrow can't replenish their blood cells enough. They're just sick. They don't have an appetite. And that's not a person that we would probably do vigorous testing on because you already know what you're going to see. You see it before you. You know what they've been through. There's a lot of inflammatory components. There's a lot of...
Now, at this place, is this generally a patient that has already been through a chemotherapy in the conventional system and then walks into your door? Or is this someone who might present stage 4, gets a diagnosis, and then comes to you fresh?
Well, no. So like we were saying in this scenario, this is somebody who's been currently in chemotherapy, but they're on a break because
Got it.
They need it. They still have disease, but the body can't tolerate it because they've been through so much. And that's sort of all right, I'm finally willing to take a look at this stuff called naturopathic medicine or this natural medicine, which we get a lot of that still to this day. And early on in this discussion, in the introduction, you use the word belief. I have taken the word belief as much out of my clinical vocabulary when discussing with patients as I have seen fit and as I can, because I don't know that there's a room for beliefs in medicine which de-objectifies it, which creates more opinion, which maybe moves it more in terms of religion. When somebody doesn't believe in natural medicine, I mean, that's fine if a patient doesn't want to engage in it because they don't believe in it, but it's different when there's clear data or there's patient perspectives.
So where does that line cross you? And we talk a lot about hope, but hope is a belief in you going into remission when it comes to a cancer patient, or a belief in beating the odds. So where do you run that fine line between a realistic look on what we're facing versus I also want you to have a hope that your body can heal?
Well, in order for somebody to undergo conventional medicine, they still have to believe that it's going to work. But I don't really hear people saying like, actually sometimes I don't believe in conventional medicine. It's more, I don't believe in this, or my oncologist doesn't believe in natural medicine. I'm like, well, maybe you need a new oncologist. I don't understand. Nothing to believe in. It's pretty clear,
Yeah.
Office is outside of a cancer center. We're sitting here on a medical campus, one of the biggest in Scottsdale. Plus, we could, look at the data. And I have these discussions quite often. But people seem to just have this untoward belief, most often in conventional medicine, that hope is a belief within oneself that something will work for them, but it's not usually transitioned, or recognize that you have to believe in conventional. And
So you're talking about the actual systems, not in the cure, like the conventional system versus the naturopathic system, the belief in one.
I'm trying to limit belief and show people more actuality in what happens, because in my opinion, I've been in naturopathic oncology long enough that I am seasoned, and I've seen thousands and thousands of patients of rare and common cancers of literally all ages, from less than one all the way into the 90s. I mean, it's a big spread. So somebody may be listening and argue, well, then how could you really be an expert if you're seeing all ages, all types of cancer? And the answer to that is, well, I'm not an expert in all types of cancer. I mean, the bulk of my practice is seeing people with breast cancer. It's every day, and sometimes literally all day. Different types of breast cancer, different discussions. But the world of oncology and the approach to the patient is incredibly robust, that each patient does generally present differently, with different needs, different stages, different tolerances and medications.
What I think is really interesting about this is I always say, we have unique fingerprints. We metabolize different. It's very true. But to your point, when it comes to belief, if I'm looking through an actual system and on the medical systems, this podcast wouldn't need to happen if people would turn to this style of medicine first and have a belief. Oftentimes we have to show and prove that, hey, your body is beautiful. It's designed to heal. And so having the facts in the science and the support and the data to show that is good, right? This isn't just witchcraft medicine. There's a point we're doing this, and that's to try to get the word out that your body's beautiful and it can heal. Now, is that perfect 100% of the time in cancer patients in anything we talk? No, it's not. But we believe your body can heal. And to have someone walk into your doors, whether conventional has failed them or they're just kind of on a hiatus because their body can't handle, back-to-back chemotherapy, it's a good thing.
Absolutely. You mentioned, well, it's good to be able to show the data and to help people understand that the body can heal. And you're talking about what I call the human frame, physiology, and psyche. Like, that's a given. Like, that's how the food that we have, the EMF that we're exposed to, the number of chemicals in our environment, in our shower water, in the water we wash our hands in, what we're exposed to day to day, the car seats that we sit on, the desks that we touch, the computers, the phone, all of it is brand new when you consider the age of humanity.
Yep.
And I do find it a little bit ridiculous that we have to prove to another human to get them to believe in how we've been for millions of years before the last 20 years, 30 or 80, 100 years as things have been building.
Yeah. And just for listeners out there, when we're talking about EMFs, the toxicity, we've talked in previous podcasts around the body burden, right? The things that we face on a day-to-day. Absolutely. You wake up, you put makeup on your face, you shower in water that has chemicals in it, right? We eat processed food. And so we're just really talking about the body burden that has changed in the toxicity load over the last 20 to 30 years.
Well, it's real. And information is really easy to get. And people, I think, know inherently how a body is supposed to be treated. It's just treating it that way. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to find time to exercise for some people. It's hard to find time to go buy fresh food and then to cook it, prepare it, cook it, clean it, go buy it again, prepare it, cook it, clean it. And so that's why, for me, when we develop a philosophy, kind of bringing it back, and when somebody's, says, well, how did this start? You can get a genomic anomaly, where a problem in a cellular programming in a tissue, an ovary, a pancreas, a liver, a lymph node, a breast, from a compendium of things that we've already discussed, and that cell can survive. So that could be the cause. The problem is it's difficult to go back. You can't go back to there and test and say, like, look, I found what the problem is, because you may be a year past that by the time somebody gets to your. So hopefully that helps, and helps your listeners too. And it's not to be coy or cavalier about it, but there is a lot that our bodies are bombarded with in a very few decades that has been developed. I mean, people, if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, you have watched this happen very quickly. And it's very different than it used to be. I mean, I was in high school and grammar school in the 80s. And so, we didn't have certain things. So I've been pretty clear. And as a naturopathic doctor, it's important for me to be able to have these sophisticated discussions with people so they understand it, and why talking about putting the right things in is important. So
earlier in the conversation, and then I do want to get towards talking about treatment, but earlier in the conversations, we were talking about checking in with your body. And that is one thing that's often overlooked when we put food inside of our bodies, thinking, is this going to serve me? And it's those questions when we're looking at this body burden. How is this impacting my body, right? Just checking in and having this ultimate intuitive feel into how your body is processing, and then just being thankful for our body's resilience, I think is huge. But let's talk treatment. So someone comes to you and you run some tests. They're an active cancer patient. Where do you go?
You have to develop a scenario, because it's so N of one. And if somebody who is actively having cancer, for me, I use the term person with cancer. That's something that I brought into my world a long time ago to make sure that I philosophically am elevating the person above the diagnosis. And that's very, dear to me. Where is this person in this journey?
Now, I want to just interject here, because that is something that I took away from listening to a couple of your videos. And just so you guys know, Dr. Rubin has a ton of videos on his website. We can link them in our show notes. They're on-demand videos, but really when he says person with cancer, that is stemming from oftentimes you are a cancer patient. You're putting the diagnosis, you're elevating it above yourself. We hear this every single time we think through someone we know or ourselves is struggling with cancer. And so really just changing that verbiage and saying, no, I'm a person first. This affliction, this chronic condition is second. It's never above me.
Totally. Yeah, that chokes me up to hear you talk about it like that. It's important. That simple phrase can be so dominating. Cancer patient, cancer patient, cancer patient. That's what you hear all the time. And I agree. We need to flip it. We need to flip that. So testing, we do have a lot of people who come to us for decision making. What would be my next treatment? Here's my situation. I want to prevent this from coming back. I have an unclear scan. I'm waiting 3 months to see if the thing manifests and grows. I've been prescribed a medication. I'm not sure I want to take it. Here's why. Like, those are people who have some time to sort things out, and they come to us to help sort that out, because we're versed in conventional and naturopathic, functional, integrative, whatever term, just not alternative anymore. I don't see how this is. There's not really an alternative. It's integrative. We integrate all day, every day, constantly. And so, I mean, obviously you can use the word alternative if somebody doesn't want to take a certain medicine and there's an alternative to it. But, a lot of times in the world in sort of like the post-treatment world, there aren't a lot of follow-up things in conventional medicine. They just do blood tests, maybe do a physical exam and run a scan. And so there is no alternative to what we do, right? So because there's so much we can look at and dive into the body. So those people who come to us with this complex decision-making, that's a really unique opportunity to dive in and dedicate a lot of energy teaching people what type of testing, because some of it costs money. Some can be covered by insurance, but not all of it. And they need to decide if they want to invest in that, essentially investing in their health and seeking my advice to help determine not only what testing to do, but how to interpret it and then how to treat based on that, and then help make those decisions, whether or not they're going to opt for something or procedure that takes depth of understanding. You brought up the word depth, and that takes, without question, specialization. You can't have that depth without focus, and you don't have specialization without focus. And that's really where where it was born, the importance of specialization. We should say that in naturopathic medicine, after the Oncology Association was born and was running, other specialties, there was a couple before us, but it wasn't focused in like an ology. It was more like a treatment phase or obstetrics or homeopathy. And the Oncology Association was really, it was unique. And I know environmental medicine, women's health, pediatrics, gastroenterology, endocrinology, these have really, been born from that, sports medicine. But the point is that's a great place to test. The person who comes to us with great fatigue, who is in treatment, and that treatment could be radiation, that they just finished radiation and they're looking to go on a medicine, or maybe they finished radiation, there's nothing, after that, and they want to recover. Or the person who, like we mentioned before, is taking a break from chemotherapy just because their body can't handle it and they need to recover. Why? Well, generally in conventional oncology, there's no attention really paid to nutrients some, but not the way naturopathic doctors do it. So I generally say that in general, us as a practice, us non-conventionalists, naturopathic oncologists, we're not as good at like getting rid of the tumor. We don't do surgery per se. We don't have toxic meds. It's not like we can't, but in general, conventional medicine is better at trying to annihilate. But they don't do anything that we do in terms of how we look at the body, how we view and how we support the body. And that may sound softer to the listeners, but it's not. It's a gigantic, huge, gaping hole in conventional medicine that we're here for. And it's one of the reasons that integrative oncology exists, is because there's such a greater recognition of this by patients that you don't have to necessarily go through treatment being super toxic. And you know what? We can make things work better. And you can still function and take a vacation and work at your job and play your sport and watch your kids' performance. Like, you can do all that without having a fever or vomiting or being at home. But cancer is a big diagnosis and it incorporates a lot. So hopefully that helps. I know we haven't talked about specific testing. That really gets complicated to like outline, a certain type of testing. But if you want me to, or if you want to discuss like a terrain or inflammation or circulating tumor cells or, prevention of recurrence, for the listeners out there, it really does get complex. It is not at all simple. It's really not, because you have to understand, when I do a panel of tests, which could be 35 tests, I look at that as one test when I discuss it with my patients. And I say, this may seem like a lot of tests, but to me, it's one, because you're one body. I'm just testing different aspects of the body. And then you have to narrate for the patient. In our clinic, when we get all those labs back, either the person's sitting in front of me or they're on a screen like this or on the phone, we go through and we write down all those results. We narrate as we're doing it. And then you have to sum it up, because you have to figure out what to do. So you have to, have that philosophy.
So you're coming up with a blueprint, really, a plan for the individual. Now, when that plan is implemented and the person who's implementing it is taking it seriously and following your directions, your directives, are you seeing cancer go into remission? Are you seeing more of like, hey, you were given 3 months. Now we're going to see what happens, right? It could be 3 years. It could be 10 years. Someone comes to you in stage 4 cancer. They have, a couple months to live. They don't really know what that looks like. You give them a blueprint. You give them the plan. They follow it. They have belief in their bodies. Have you seen that come through to where someone's diagnosis has kind of dramatically changed? Is that rare?
Well, the diagnosis necessarily wouldn't change, but the prognosis or their course of their disease, I think, is more what you were getting at. Would change. Absolutely and routinely. And that's a big part of what we do constantly, all day and every day at this clinic. And it's not. So
that's not a rare occasion.
No, that's what I do every day in the trenches. Yes.
Now, it makes me think of something that we think through in conventional medicine often as management of
Yeah, let me
symptoms.
back up for a second. You used the term 3 weeks. 3 weeks is pretty heavy duty because a lot of people who are given a prognosis of 3 weeks may not be fit to even come into the clinic. Some of them can't get here. They'd have to come by ambulance.
If I said weeks, I meant months, but either way, 3 months is pretty quick.
Big time. And that is routine. Absolutely. And I'm with you on that.
Yeah. We've talked around cancer before on this podcast, and it's just it's a term that evokes a lot of emotion. And so I want someone listening here who's super skeptical to say, my diagnosis is not defining me, right? I'm a person first, and there is hope yet.
Well, yes. That's so important. I mean, you said it so beautifully, and thank you. It helps give me context too to, have discussed that. And you're right. And you rise above and you become powerful. And it is that mindset, and that is your self-belief. It's not your doctor. I mean, your doctor, just going back to this term belief, it's okay for people to believe in things. I was just talking about physicians not believing in something that is already proven. So absolutely. And we see that some of these patients that come to see us, it is so amazing the amount of confidence that they have and determination, and they do well. I have seen many people save their lives. My philosophy is if you come and see me, you're hiring me to do a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I like doing my job really well. That's how I just feel about myself and feel about humanity in general. And there's a lot of people out there that don't like their oncologist or don't like their doctor or whatever. I'm like, well, and maybe this is a person who is, in a company or in a manager or a CEO or something. I'm like, well, do you want to hire an employee to do, that isn't doing a good job? So, that's my philosophy, and I like to show them the work that I do for them and let them understand. I think a really big part of how I practice is intentionalism. And one of the mentors of the profession, who has since passed, Bill Mitchell, who was a great philosopher of our profession, really introduced intentionalism as a seventh precept of naturopathic medicine. And I do advocate for that. When you have
now, when you say intentionalism, and sorry to cut you off there, but you said, I've seen many people save themselves versus saying I've saved many people. And I just noticed that of like such an empowering term of how you phrase that we have power, right? To change our destiny. And the destiny might be given by conventional medicine. It might be given by a family member. We have power.
Absolutely. And that's why they're hiring me to do something, because I and my colleagues like myself, we're good at our job. So I'm on the podcast, right? Because people can be good at their job. And this is what I do, right? I'm a naturopathic oncologist. But it's not like I go and say, okay, you're my patient, come on. Like, they saw us out. They made the decision, they made the phone call, they went through the process. And there's people out there that know, even against certain medical advice, they persist. And I see these lab tests come up, or these scans, or a surgery or something happen, where if they hadn't persisted in what they knew was going on, or what they knew, not believed, knew, they would have maybe died or been in, an advanced stage before at diagnosis. And that's recognition of that at the physician level is really important, because it gets, if you recognize that, you understand your patient on a different level, and you can communicate and order different tests and approach them differently. And like you said, it's very empowering, especially from somebody on this side of the desk, to be able to show that to a patient when they may feel that, but they've never gotten the recognition or validation from any of their other physicians, or maybe they have. But that's a special time when we have those discussions with each other. And patients deserve to be empowered, in my opinion, people with cancer.
You're in Arizona, someone sitting in Indiana right now listening to this. What's your best advice? They're struggling with being a person with cancer. What's your best advice to them?
First and foremost is treat the body how a human body is supposed to be treated, which means maybe it's a walk in nature. Maybe it's an organic salad because you haven't had a salad in a while, but there are certain things inherently that we know that our body needs. And it's easy to forget those in a busy life. Number one. And number two is remember to laugh. There is sometimes a lack of laughter, and there is a unique physiological signature when we laugh. The composition of tears, when we laugh versus when we cry, that says it. And laughter changes physiology. It reduces pain. It obviously can improve mood. It changes things. And I think it's truly a treatment. And I think the third thing would be is don't stop until you're satisfied. Remember, it's you, and that you're hiring physicians. You're still in charge of your own body, and which is, I think, really important for people to realize and maintain.
Yeah, we talk a lot around being an advocate. Whatever system you're in right now, if you're listening and you're in the conventional system, we're happy you're here. Be an advocate for your body.
Yeah.
I think those three things apply to whether you're walking around trying to prevent a chronic illness or whether you're sitting right now with
if you're not, who will be?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Rubin, it's just been an interesting discussion. I'd have to say this one stretched me in a really cool way. And I hope listeners feel the same way of just being thoughtful around our bodies and how we frame things and then how we walk through with someone who is a person with cancer. So listeners out there, please share this,
Awesome.
Spread the love and spread the hope. Thank you so much.